Hello and welcome back to the Argyle Martech Leadership Forum, Smarter Tech for Marketing Success. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Ted Schachter, Associate Professor, Marketing Communications with Fashion Institute of Technology. We're excited to have Ted and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled, Putting Games to Work, Using Gamification to Capture Customer Insights. Ted, thank you so much for being a moderator today. We're excited about this session. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for that nice introduction. And by the way, those points for questions is a great example of gamification. I'd like to have CJ and Leslie introduce themselves before we move on with the panel discussion. CJ?
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to be having this discussion. And my agency's name is called Cinda Media Lab. And I'm also a professor and curriculum chair at FIT. And my subject area is creative technology and design.
Thank you, CJ. And Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Pogue. I am founder and chief happy officer of LP Speak. I'm author of 2 books, and I am a mental wellness consultant. So thank you so much for having me here. I use gamification in my trainings and my consulting and throughout all the interaction with my clients.
That's great. We're looking forward to learning a lot more about gamification from you. So before we start, why don't we begin with what exactly is gamification from a definitional point of view, from a marketing point of view? Leslie, so why don't you take it first?
Well, gamification is really just interaction. It is that engagement and learning and developing how to engage with your audience. So using gamification helps people to just stay engaged, especially in our virtual world. I think it helps a lot.
Okay, and thank you for that. And CJ, from an agency point of view and the work you've done, how do you think about gamification?
Yeah, a lot of time I think people make this mistake because the word gamification has the word game in it. So when they think about this, they think, oh, it has to be like a full-blown game, right? With all kinds of rules and all kinds of defeating or killing monsters, for example. But actually, that's not always the case. I mean, that can be one kind of gamification, but that's not always the case. My personal definition of it is, from agency perspective, is to create delightful, entertaining, and engaging experience. We want to make sure that whatever that marketing is trying to do, and we want to turn it into something that people enjoy doing just because it's fun.
All right, so based on what you said, why don't we just take it to the next level? Can you give us some examples of some strategies you used that illustrate that gamification definition you just expressed?
Sure. So I think gamification can be used by any business across different industries, from education to product companies. So there are a lot of different ways or possibilities within this umbrella of gamification strategy. So I would say, from our perspective, when we do the creative to come up with a strategy, creative strategy, I focus on 3 pillars. Number 1 is the archetype of the brand. Number 2 is what's the campaign objectives. Of course, that's developed with the client. And then also another thing is a deep understanding of the target audiences. Because in order to create something that's fun, you need to figure out who is going to be playing it, right? So I'm going to show some examples. Not all the examples I'm showing today is going to be from my own agency. I will tell you when it's from my agency, but I want to pick out some examples that everybody understand and know. For example, the first example I want to show is this one. It's McDonald's. Now, what's the archetype of McDonald's? If you are not familiar with the archetype, basically it's a way of personalizing the brand. So McDonald's is the typical everyday guys and girls brand, right? So they want to be wholesome. They want to embrace family value. They want to have fun in that sense. So for them to create this game, a Monopoly game. I believe many of us have played. It has been on the market for 35 years. So obviously it's probably pretty successful. Now, that's a great match between the brand archetype as well as their target audiences. Understand this is something that feels like family coming together. Now, the next one I want to use as a case study is this game developed by actually US Army. And this game has been around for 20 years. Another great successful example of gamify. But US Army, their archetype is hero. So they actually developed a full-blown shooting game. I'm not going to play the whole thing, maybe 30 seconds so you can see it's an actual shooting game with violence and blood, as you can see here. I think you get the idea. So it's a very direct representation of their archetype and then get people who are into this type of game and then have that great connection and interaction and engagement with the brand. So the next example is done by my agency, and the client, some of you may know, is Gone, who they are the legendary American company who design and the first company that design and create teddy bear. So they wanted to rebrand themselves because they struggled a little bit during the digital age. So we did the rebranding, which completely transformed their brand image from something like a Switch watchmaker into something that's much softer because their archetype is caregiver. Now, so to launch this rebrand, we decided to go to gamification as a strategy. So we created this campaign called How Do You Hug? It is a cost marketing campaign, but we gamified it to make it fun. Instead of just say, hey, we donate this amount of money or this amount of toys, we make this whole process involve the user, involve their fans, and make it fun. So you can see, I have a case study video here I'm going to play, and then I'll go through a little more in detail.
A hug embodies the essence of comfort, but in a world that is as fast and preoccupied as today, the warmth of a hug is becoming increasingly difficult to find. Introducing #HowDoYouHug, a social movement celebrating human connections on social media. For over a century, Gund has been creating the most huggable, soft toys for people around the world. And we believe there are as many ways to feel the warmth of a hug as there are stars in the sky. It could be a reassuring touch from your mom, an encouraging wink from your proud father, or a surprising hot chocolate from a dear friend on a cold and rainy day. How do you hug in this world where intimacy can be both instant and distancing? We would like to know. Tell us how you hug, and we will give soft, cuddly toys to children in need of comfort. It's that easy. With every online interaction, happiness multiplies. Visit howdoyouhug.org for more information and to send hugs to those who need them the most.
So this is the actual website where people can interact with this campaign. So we create this huggometer, and every milestone reached, and then send the free toys to children in need. And we designed this whole campaign this way, have multiple ways that people can engage. It's because our understanding of the target audiences, because we realize in this connected but distant world, the young generation, the way they view hug is very different from the older generation. So we give them ability to show that they care by sharing this campaign on social media, using the Gun's toy to create their own social media avatar, or actually upload photos and tell everybody this is the way they define what a new hug is. So that's, I think this is a good example of how those three pillars all come together. Your brand archetype, understanding of the audiences and all those important things, and campaign objective, which is to promote the brand, all come together. And the last one I want to show quickly is from Starbucks.
Okay.
So this one is, I want to show this one quickly.
From the Starbucks, you love your tall double shot skinny latte and the little surprises that come with it. With the new My Starbucks Rewards, we're rewarding you with more of the things that make you smile. First, you need a Starbucks card. Simply pick one up and register it online. Each time you use
No, what I mean is, what did you want to say about Starbucks?
Yeah, so what I want to say about Starbucks is, it's not a game, but the making the giving out rewarding experience fun and easy. And that's how I see the different way of utilizing this strategy.
So thank you very much. Those are really great examples. And I think the audience got a really good understanding of the many dimensions of gaming and how to integrate it. Leslie, what challenges have your clients faced that you've helped them solve within the gamification construct?
Well, thank you for that question. When deciding on how to approach it, I really remind my clients that they need to know why they're doing it, understand the why. It's great to reach out to agencies and hire, but if you're not understanding what the end result is, then you're just throwing in games for game's sake. And you don't want to do that, because adults are tricky, because adults still remember how to have fun, but if you're doing it too much, or you're doing it in a way that doesn't speak to their immediate need, then they're going to feel like it's a waste of time. Like, why am I doing this? I could be doing, I have 8 million other things to be doing. So when you're thinking about your gamification strategy, you want to really keep in mind, what do you want the end result to be? And what is your audience? Do they have the attention span? What message are you trying to get across to them? And that really helps to really make it enjoyable and have a good return on investment for the client, because your end user is engaged and they'll be talking about it. And that's what you really want too.
It's an interesting point you made about ROI, because one of the questions is from someone named Lindsay Smith, and she asked, is gamification expensive, and how can I justify the ROI? And I know you've worked in training, and I'm sure companies would always say, well, what's the ROI?
Yeah, at the end of the day, when you do introduce anything, you do have to break it down to the numbers. Now, luckily in my field, I've never had to really break down the numbers for them.
Right.
But how I show them that it's effective is through surveys, it's through engagement, and also through hearing, how they're talking about it later. So that return on investment, you get it. I'm sure CJ can speak to the analytics around it possibly, but I know for me, what I find is in surveys, people will tell you, and they let you know what worked, what didn't work. You also see it in their end product, when you see their interaction in what you're trying to get across to them. Have they retained it better? Is their production better? That's where you see the ROI. And those are the ROIs that we don't really keep track of a lot of times.
But they're probably important, and yes, those are the what I like to call the soft numbers, as opposed to conversion. But down the road, they actually are accretive to the revenues of the company. A happy employee, a more productive employee is a better employee.
Exactly, because you're looking at people, you're looking at absenteeism, you're looking at people who are now quiet quitters, as they're calling them. So people who are not doing what you need them to do, who are not stepping up, that tells you that the gamification or lack thereof isn't even going to be a factor one way or the other with them. But the ones that you might have had on the fence, and you've introduced this training, and that training was fun for them and they looked forward to it, or they're talking about it afterwards, that's your positive ROI. That's your, okay, we saved this one, and now this one is more engaged in what they're doing, and it was successful in that way. And that might not be captured in numbers,
but maybe capturing the overall results. Is just a question of identifying them. So CJ, how expensive are you guys?
Well, it depends on what you're asking for.
Well,
right?
The question basically is talking about to implement, and of course it has to do with technology and how much work is on, but in general, what do you, let's say if you're just going to do a basic website with a call to action, some video, you know, the traditional more or less website. If you add in the gaming, like the hug part, and I'm not asking how much you charge, Gun, but what would a client expect? Let's say 10% more, 20% more, and of
Yeah.
course with Fiverr, everything's $2, but theoretically.
Yeah, so I think that an important part of the consulting process that we have at the very beginning with the client, I personally usually ask for a ballpark number in terms of what kind of budget they have in mind. Well, obviously, I'm not going to ask them to commit to a certain number. I want to know, though, because that changes how we develop our strategy and our creativity. Because I'm not going to develop a full-blown first-person shooter game for the brand if they don't have that budget, right? But the 4 examples I shown, for example, if I just use those 4, the Monopoly is probably the cheapest in terms of development because it's print-based, right?
I would have said Starbucks is cheaper because it's just, you know, get Starbucks rewards and they have to sign up for it.
Right, but they have to have that whole app developed in terms of it. So that's development cost there. So the Starbucks and the website that we built, the marketing website we built for Gone, that's probably the second level there. And the full-blown first-person shooter game is definitely the most expensive. So I think one of the key is if your company or brand is considering gamification, have a ballpark budget number in mind so the creative team have an idea where to go for with their creative.
One thing that you said that was interesting is the ancillary costs, like an app. All right, this is an interesting question. Lindsay is very inquisitive, and that's terrific because it helps the conversation. There's a question she asked me is, how can you encourage and entice repeat engagement? My theory is, and I like to add this, is that if you have continuous rewards like discounts or coupons or games, but I want to turn over, Leslie, how do you get rewards from a B2B scenario like you do in training or other cases? Is there makes people enticed to do this, assuming it's not mandatory?
Well, if it's not mandatory and it's you know just what they want to do, then enticing awards is really giving them what they need. So what is the hole, what that they're trying to fill? You know, so do they have people that need more information, but they don't have the time to do the training for them? Okay, well then maybe the reward for this can be a book or an infographic or something like that. Something that's downloadable, ideally, because we're so rarely doing things in person. My brain still thinks in person. I miss it so terribly. But you know, these are things that are easily downloadable. So when you're thinking about rewards, think about, don't think about something for the sake of something. Make it, attach it to what the end lesson is or what the end takeaway is, but also use it as an opportunity to promote something. So maybe you're doing something, maybe you're doing sexual harassment, we'll say. And so,
we're trying to prevent it, right? Not doing it.
We're definitely trying to prevent it. Exactly.
Okay.
You're right. You want to be clear on that.
That's completely different. That's a different panel discussion.
Thank you, Ted, for making sure, because I'll be on, TikTok next. You're doing sexual harassment training to prevent it. And but open enrollment is coming up. So maybe one of the rewards for participating, even though it is mandatory, but to make people like, okay, I know I don't want to do this, but I have to do it. And they throw in maybe a free chiropractic session, and then, or something that happens during open enrollment or something that leads into it. But when you're thinking about rewards, you want to tie it into the business, tie it in what's coming up, what they need, what they're lacking, anything like that. You don't want to just throw a reward like free coffee at the end of the day kind of a reward. So think along those lines. So
there's difference between B2B and B2C and internal company. So CJ, let me ask you this. This is another interesting question, which falls into the 4 examples that you gave. And this is gamification considered more of an awareness engagement marketing strategy versus a buy now strategy? That this person is from the healthcare industry and trying to understand how to take advantage of this really cool channel. I mean, healthcare is completely maybe outside your scope, but I mean, it can be for awareness, it can be for multiple results, correct?
Yeah, the engagement is definitely there, and the more engagement that the customer have with your brand, the more possibility that they are going to purchase your services or product. And these things is all, I wouldn't say I create a game to sell you things, because then that is not the right approach to not the right use of gamification, because it becomes a sales pitch. The game itself has to be fun, right? So let's say, take the gun example. The social media campaign that we created was to launch the new branding, which leads to quadruple their social media followings in about 18 months. Then the next year, their year-to-year sales went up 20%. So can I say all that 20% is because of what we did? Probably not. But does that contribute to it? We believe so. I would believe that that happened after the rebrand and the marketing campaign. So it all connected in that sense.
But we also got to look at the McDonald's example you gave, that you have to buy products to get the pieces to play Monopoly. So
that's true.
Would that incentivize to buy more McDonald's so I can get more game pieces?
It's possible, because if let's say, well, I like McDonald's fries more, but if I say I'm okay with any fries, I just want fries, but this one can possibly give me some reward and have some gamification like fun, I would do it that way, right? Because it adds the benefit, basically.
So in other words, if I have $10 to spend for lunch and I have a pizza place here and McDonald's here, I say, well, with McDonald's, I also have a chance to win something. So it makes it a differentiator when all things being quote unquote equal.
Exactly.
That's actually, I hope that answers that question. So I just want to go down to the next question on my list is, which ties into this conversation. How do we hire an agency or a consultant to help us with our gamification strategy? So CJ, let's start with you and then we'll go into Leslie's. So when they hire an agency, they already have a marketing agency, I assume. They might have worked the design team. So there are already a lot of players already in the game. I know with Gun, you've done more than just, the game. But if they hire, they say, we have all this. We need to integrate gamification. How would you work within that dynamic, that space with so many different players?
Yeah, in most cases, all of our clients actually came from referral. So I would say that's the first most important thing from agency perspective. Every single job, big or small, that we get, we put 110% into it to make sure the result is there. So the next time, but
how do you work with the other elements that they already have?
Right. And that varies quite a bit. For example, Gun has internal marketing and design team. So we have to work with them. And to start with, we always start with consultation. What's your internal resources? What can we provide? And most importantly, what do you need? What is the goal that you want? Why did you make this call? And why am I here? And I would say, if you're a brand and a company, during the consultation meeting, if the agency keep on trying to sell you what they already they know how to do, I think that's a red light right there, right? Because the first consultation meeting, at least from my perspective, should be about understanding your needs. Because a lot of time, clients, doesn't matter the mix of the player that's at the table, a lot of time they may not know exactly what they need. So you have to know what's the problem they're trying to solve first before you can make any recommendation. So I think that interaction in the first couple of meetings is very important. And my suggestion is look for an agency that start with asking you, why did you make this call? What is the problem you're trying to solve?
So Leslie, I know as a consultant, your job would be to guide people into the process. So how do you help them overcome, let's say, some anxiety, lack of knowledge, lack of information, so they can make the right actionable decision?
Thank you for that. A lot of time I will, like CJ mentioned, find out what the end result is. What are you trying to get across? And so that's a nice way to guide them. I also actually like to ask, what has been their issues in the past? What are they finding is the main I guess, stopper that is keeping people from enjoying the gamification or anything they've done in the past? What are they finding as the leading contributor to why they feel they need it? Why are they doing it? And so once I can understand that, and understanding what kind of company they are as well. Are they a fun kind of company, or are they a more serious company? I've had clients, like I've worked with the Air Force, and the Air Force, I didn't know that they actually enjoyed the day until the end of my day or my end of my time with them, because of the faces were just straight and focused and serious. And that didn't mean that they weren't enjoying it. It just meant that that's who they are. So understanding your audience as well really helps you to decide what kind of gamification to do. So when I talk to them, then they kind of know what to go to the table for, say, a CJ, to say, okay, so we know that our people are this, 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 and this, and this. We want to look for this, and then that makes hopefully his job easier, because they actually do have some answers. Because to his point, a lot of times they don't know what they need, and so they're looking to the experts to guide them. And so if I can give them like 2 or 3 points to walk in the door with a larger expert, then they feel more ready for that conversation. And again, it makes an agency's job a little bit easier, because they don't have to pull out so much.
So I like to ask you this question, which builds a little bit on that. And I hope you can answer it, because I think you have a lot of experience that will answer this. I know that when I walk into a classroom, I never know. I know I have a diverse group of students, and my lesson will hit some of them the right way. Some of them, maybe culturally may say, what did he just say?
Right.
And even though I'm very careful about what I say. Now, within a company, there are a lot of different cultures and languages being spoken, and you've done training on the company side. How does a company adjust gamification in a multicultural, multilingual environment where people may react to the games differently?
That is a fantastic question, and so relevant right now, and that companies really need to be cognizant of the diversity that is in a group. And the ideal way, both digitally and in person, is really to make it neutral. For instance, I've done this in person, so this doesn't fall digitally, and this is more of a training world, but this is the
Right.
example I've used, is one of the exercises I've had people do to understand exactly what you're saying, how diverse your area, your company, and people are, is to create your own language and use
Starbucks.
exactly right. Pick 3 things in the room: the wall, the table, the chair, whatever, and come up with your own. And you break them off into different groups, and you can do this as a breakout or whatever, but have them decide, have them create their own language and then teach it to other people. And that can be done digitally, that can be done in person, but getting people to really understand how hard it is to adapt to another person and recognize some of those differences is really how gamification can really help, because it really makes sense. I remember one lady once in one of my classes, she said, when you started this, I had no idea where you were going with this. And by the end of it, she was totally on board. This totally makes sense. I understand now. She had a person in mind that she worked with that was a problem. It just really drives it home. So whether you do it in person or digitally, that it really speaks to how the brain works, and having it play out in front of you. A lot of times for the people that don't naturally get it, they'll get it. And it's like, oh, I see, because they're actually living it in the moment.
That's a fantastic answer, and I'm so glad you were able to add so much insights into it. I'm sorry. CJ, let me ask you this then. With the gun campaign on social media, I'm sure, which is a business to consumer type thing. And when we live in a kind of a cancel culture, can we do something like this that can be seen in so many different countries by so many different people who may have different relationship, both with stuffed animals and hugging and, other relationships with that? How do we account for that to both have it fun and successful and not try to stir up too many negative emotions?
That's actually a great question, and that was it was really interesting because it feels like a B2C campaign, right?
Yes.
But it's actually Gun is actually a B2B company because
Oh,
when I say your client customer, he say, well, you think our customers are everyday people who buy the toy? He say, actually not. And then that's the first thing I learned from the consultation meeting. They say our customers are actually buyers at stores. Then we actually have our creative, our researcher to shadow their salesperson to see how that B2B process, getting your product on the floor in the store happens. So that speaks to basically what your question really is about. Our research process is extensive. A lot of times people say, your creative team, go create. I say, no, I need to know what I'm dealing with before I jump in. So in our process, the research and development time are usually 50-50. So we did desk research, understand the industry. We compare the industry, the competitors. We go ahead, we understand the market landscape, and we understand the internal culture. So we have empathy interview with internal people from all different departments to understand that. We interview their target audiences. We shadow them to their sales process. We go into store to watch how consumer interact and buy a plush toy. All that has to happen before we decide what to do with the rebrand and with the marketing. So by the time we go to the creative process, we create something we call persona. So represent who we're targeting, maybe not for every campaign, but for this campaign, who are we targeting? And we remind ourselves continuously, these are the people we're trying to impress, try to get, so we will develop a game and make them feel comfortable and have fun to play with.
Well, let me give you a scenario. This is for you and for Leslie. And so somebody said, you come up with this great game, whatever it is, or interaction. Let's just call it an interaction. And somebody says, you know, I love this, but can we, and we have the budget to do it. That's not the consideration. And we'd like your research. How can I start small and grow into that? How do you handle something like that? Because there's a little bit of fear of doing too much or not mixing correctly, fear of failure. How can they just start small and then build up? That's one of the questions. How do I start just a little bit? Would you be able to tone it down, or how?
It is possible, and I would much prefer if that's a phasing approach is what needs to be done. That should happen before ideation, because then I will know to create a something that we can build on, and then make the campaign longer or larger or rolled out in phases.
But we both know that clients sometimes they love the idea, and then they see, you know, I was working as a creative director for so many years, and then they're like, can we do this exact thing, but tone it down a little? You know, it's like the exact thing, but different.
Or I like both ideas. Can you combine it?
Yes. So how would you help a client along in that process? Because you're very client-centric. And I want our audience to understand that not everything can happen beforehand.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of relationship building between an agency and the client.
Right.
And I think that trust is very important. And which means if I'm here starting this project already, and I hope that means you understand we are the subject expert here. And so I think that process is very important. And my strategy is always every single step along the way. I don't just actually, Ted, we work on project together before. I work on your project before you, so you know, every single step along the way, during the process, research process even, we get clients involved. So by the time we get to the creativity, we know them pretty well. I hope that they trust us very well already. And that's when that reduces the possibility of I come up with something and then it's not what you're expecting budget-wise or scope-wise.
Okay, Leslie, let me ask you this. And by the way, I'm not the typical client. Leslie, let me ask you this. What if you, based on the last answer you gave when you talked about developing the language and stuff. So if I'm somebody who's never done this before, now all of a sudden I may feel a little bit overwhelmed. I have to create a language. I have so many cultures. I don't want my employees to feel disenfranchised. And they come to you and they say, Leslie, can you find me a way, a path, so when I speak to agency, that I can start and then build from there? How would you be able to hopefully handle some of this uncertainty?
Well, that's a challenging question because you do have to look at your whole audience. And so in my experience, you have to try it out. You have to start as neutral as possible and see and build on that. Sometimes you're great out the gate, and whew, if you are, that's fantastic. But a lot of times, some people are still not sure of what you're referring to, what you need. And so you start off with neutral and then you build with variety. So it's like try and bring them all together, but then have little peaks of, okay, this group and this group and this group, bring them together, this group and this group and this group, bring them together. So just kind of have a layered plan of how you roll things out and how you build on that.
No, I think that's terrific. And I thank you very much. I know I went a little bit off script, but I knew you'd be an expert enough to be able and to do it, because especially since it's probably some of the things you've been handling as a consultant is mitigating the fear. So one of the other questions have to deal with AI. So CJ, here's one for you that I think it'd be interesting. Sometimes clients come, at least I remember my experience have been, we want to use AI. We need to do machine learning. And because they received all this kind of jargon, and can we do the game in the metaverse? How would you be handling some of the misconceptions about technologies clients want to use?
It does happen, because obviously something that's happening now that's trendy is always catchy, right?
Right.
So in the truth be told, a lot of the tools that we're using right now is already AI driven. For example, the way we enlarge images, the way we actually starting to incorporate AI in our initial sketching ideation process using the Mid-Journey, right? So we can type in and have it comes out. So that's not the end product, but it's embedded in our process and how we can quickly generate a lot of different ideas. So a lot of times it happens when client come in with a really rigid idea, say, this is what I want. And they'll say, that sounds like a great possibility, but first tell me, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And having that conversation, not always, but a lot of time, will help them understand, say, this may or may not be. At the end of the conversation, we can kind of understand this may or may not be the thing that we need to use.
Okay, that sounds like a very complete and very reasonable answer. So I'm very glad that we were able to hopefully have people work with an agency they trust or a consultant they trust, rather than just say, hey, do this. This is what I want, because I don't think they'll be the best results. So Leslie, question I have for you is, what rewards do you use for training? What do you think is a good reward for internal training besides it's your job, you got to do it? Which is not really a reward.
What? We can't just tell them to just do it? Come on, no. The reward, again, you want to give them a good day. So the reward a lot of times is recognition, helping them feel seen. A lot of people don't, they walk into, especially adults, they walk into training and already dreading it. So if you can shift their mindset for the day, that's really helpful. Also, again, promoting, if you are external, like I come into companies and I promote my company a lot of times. So that means my products, my things to help them. So rewards are a book or a product for free or half price or 50% or whatever. So again, like I mentioned to one of the earlier questions, if you are thinking along those lines of rewards, definitely think about what it is what your holes are and what you want to promote yourself. And if you're bringing in an outside contractor, then let them know that they can also promote their own products if that's possible. And that's a lot of the rewards you do, because that's also how we get repeat customers, repeat clients, and also additional clients. So being able to do that is really helpful.
So this sounds really like you can build a really effective business case for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, because again, people want to be seen and heard. And you can do that through gamification. You can sneak that in. You're creating, you're solving the problem and you're getting the lesson across, or you're getting the message across, or you're promoting the whatever it is, but at the same time, you're making them feel good. And that's really huge right now. It's always been huge, but really it's exemplified now that people really need to be heard and feel their feelings.
They don't want to hear, if you don't do it, you're fired. That's not really
Correct.
working these days anymore. CJ, I want to, before we sum it up for everyone at the end, CJ, I want to ask you this fine question. There's a lot of clutter in almost every market. Do you think gamification is a good way to differentiate the brand from the competition?
Well, it depends. So that's why we do competitor analysis at the very beginning of our research process. Because if everybody in the space is already doing gamification, doesn't mean you cannot do it. That simply means you have to do it better, or do it very differently and achieve a better result. So that is also very, very important. So I think that's a great question, because it leads to the source of a lot of these what we're talking about. I believe research before ideation then leads to the execution itself.
What kind of a creative person are you? All you do is research.
I'm a thinking the creative person, because this is the thing I think design industry is changing. Talking about AI is going to take a lot of very mundane design work away. I'm not saying there will be no visual designers. They will be visual designers, but we don't need a lot of them in the future, right? Because a lot of those basic design work can be done by AI. So how does an agency, what's the value of agency, right? We need to transform the design agency from service industry to idea industry. And that's why research and ideation is such an important part of our process.
Oh, that sounds terrific. So why don't we sum it up? Leslie, would you mind summing up, let's say 2 or 3 takeaways from your experience that the audience can leave with, that hopefully will make the process clear for them and give them some maybe 1 or 2 actionable steps?
Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely the takeaway is really keep your audience in mind, understand your why. That's important with anything. Just understand your why and your action step. A lot of times run a poll, find out what your people are looking for. That's really a great way to get started on finding out what kind of gamification to do. Take a poll and find out what your people are looking to do and what your goals are.
CJ, same.
I will piggyback on what Leslie was talking about. So I'm putting a link in the chat right here, which is a methodology that's very, very useful. It's called 5 Whys. And then 5 Why analysis, kind of using this formula to force you to ask why 5 times to understand what's the source. What is that source root of the problem that you're really trying to target? I think before you do anything, this is a good way of starting that thinking process. Okay, so let's end it with this. Is gamification, in both your opinions, is gamification something that's on the fringe? And I understand everything depends and research, but is gamification, do you think, on the fringe, or do you think it's going to gain a more and more important role, both in training and both in direct-to-consumer B2B, B2C marketing?
Definitely. Definitely going to gain. Yeah, it's definitely going to be important, especially as we're becoming more virtual and even hybrid, where it's definitely something that's going to be very important.
CJ.
I would say it is already mainstream, but a lot of gamified experiences doesn't feel like games. So you may not know that it's a gamified strategy. And also, I agree with Leslie, it's going to be even more important besides the points that she mentioned, also generation. Right. Millennials, Gen Zs, they love challenges. They love game. They grew up with game. That's how you communicate with them. Okay, so me as a boomer, I guess I just like FanDuel for the NFL. Listen, I really want to I appreciate both of you taking the time out of your day to offer such great insights. And what I'd like to do right now is turn it over to Michael as we bring this to a close.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Leslie and CJ, for an insightful panel discussion. This was a good one. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic session. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Ted, Leslie, CJ, thank you so much.